My name is Akshat Meni, and I am a research assistant at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. It is a matter of great pleasure to extend a warm and humble welcome to all to another edition of the ICS's Wednesday seminar titled A Decade of the BRI, Impact, Implications, and Challenges for India. The Belt and Road Initiative, launched by the Chinese government in 2013, is a comprehensive global infrastructure development strategy connecting regions such as Southeast Asia, Central Asia, the Gulf, Africa, and Europe. While China has reaped several advantages, including expanded markets, heightened trade prospects, regional development, particularly in areas like Xinjiang, and investment opportunities, it has elicited concerns like the risk of debt traps for other nations. From the outset, India's predominant perspective on BRI is primarily a geopolitical and strategic endeavour. As the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor passes through Pakistan Occupied Kashmir, the CPEC being an integral part of the BRI. It infringes upon the country's sovereignty and territorial integrity. As the Belt and Road Initiative celebrates its 10th anniversary, it is crucial to engage in a comprehensive evaluation and contemplation of the significant impact, ramifications, and challenges that India confronts in relation to this initiative. The first speaker for today's session is Dr. Waning Gao, who has recently completed her PhD at Carleton University, Canada. Her doctoral research focused on the Belt and Road Initiative, using it as a lens to explore India's approach to dealing with China within the broader context of ongoing border disputes and China's increasing global prominence. Her research interests include Indian foreign policy, Indian politics, nationalism, identity formation, and critical international relations theory. The second speaker is Professor Manish, who is Professor and Dean, School of International Studies, Central University of Gujarat. He has served in various capacities at a number of institutions such as the MPIDSA New Delhi and the Department of International Relations, Sikkim University, Gangtok. He received his PhD from the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University. His research interests include foreign policy and strategic security aspects. Professor Manish recently edited a volume titled The Belt and the Road Initiative, Implications for India, published by Pentagon Press. Today's session shall be chaired by Dr. Atul Bhardwaj, who is currently Fellow, Pradhan Mantri, Museum and Library, New Delhi. He is also an honorary fellow at the School of International Studies, University of London, and an adjunct fellow at the Institute of Chinese Studies, New Delhi. He is the author of India-American Relations, 1942 to 62, published by Routledge. He also writes a regular strategic affairs column in the Economic and Political Weekly. Before I hand over to the chair, I would like to ask all participants to follow a few housekeeping rules. All participants shall be muted during the presentation. Questions can be posted in the chat box. Please include your name and affiliation when you post the question. Alternatively, you may use the raise your hand option during the interactive session. The floor is yours, sir. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And, introducing the speakers, and two eminent speakers we have today. And the topic, of course, is, very much in news also, I would say. BRI, I remember when it was just introduced in 2000, announced in 2013, ICS, I was lucky that I went as a part of ICS delegation to China a few months, after the announcement had been made. Since then, we were nobody was clear what exactly BRI is. Even the Chinese are not really clear what exactly they're doing. But even from then on, my approach to BRI was very simple. I looked at it as primarily a geo-economic, a geostrategic initiative, which was launched by China, primarily basically challenging or rather than initiating the development of alternative trade routes. And my current project also in Nehru Memorial, which is now Pradhan Mantri Sangrahalaya and Museum, is primarily related to, I'm looking at the Eurasian connectivity part of it and how that Eurasian connectivity is going to impact the maritime order. When I say maritime order, basically maritime order which supports 90% of the international trade. And the BRI, which basically I feel focuses on developing the land bridges, the Eurasian land bridges, is likely to impact this maritime order, or is likely to take away some portion, a large portion of the maritime trade away to pass through the land. So there is a big impact that BRI is making. One biggest impact is that the current geopolitics is being defined in terms of connectivity. India is, India has been very keen to develop new routes, new connectivity routes. We developed Chhabar port. We started the North-South corridor. And in the latest G20, if you hear, there is a big announcement of another big connectivity project, which is the India Middle East European Economic Corridor. Now, so all these, a lot of geopolitics of the current times is being defined by the routes and the connectivity that is going to emerge in the future. So keeping that in mind, I'm sure that today's discussion is going to be wonderful. And how India should view, we would like to hear that from Dr. Waning Gao. And of course, Manish will enlighten us actually, because we were colleagues, Manish and me were colleagues in IDS a long back. And, I really remember those days when we used to have chai together and discuss a lot of international politics. And since then, Manish has gone places, and it's wonderful to be back here. So I would now, without much ado, I would hand it over to Waning Gao. Please, Dr. Waning Gao, please express yourself. We are here to listen to you.
Thank you very much. So let me share my screen at first. Share screen. Here. Okay, can everybody see this PowerPoint?
Yes.
Okay, okay. Okay, good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for organizing such a great event. Indeed, it's a perfect time to reflect the Belt and Road initiatives and its impact, implication, and challenges for India. What I will do is I will do a quick recap of the BRI, including the success and the failure so far, and then I will bring your attention to China's new proposal on global governance. In many ways, these proposals might gradually become focal points of China's future foreign policy approach, potentially subsuming the BRI under them. And then I will talk about its implications, impact, and challenges to India. So to begin with the history, as already noted, nearly a decade ago, Xi Jinping introduced the Silk Road economic belt and the 21st century maritime Silk Road during his visits to Kazakhstan and Indonesia. And this concept involving what was first referred as the One Belt, One Road, and eventually took on the widely recognized title of the Belt and Road Initiatives. And the significance of the BRI is evident in its integration into the Chinese Communist Party's constitution in 2017, underscoring its central role in Xi Jinping's policies. So based on the official Chinese sources, there are approximately 3,000 infrastructure ventures affiliated with the BRI, and around 150 nations participating in various BRI-related activities. Though exact figures remain uncertain, it's broadly believed that the investment in the BRI could reach up to 1 trillion from its launch in 2013 to the middle 2020s. And according to the Boston University, China's Overseas Development financing database from 2008 to 2021. China's two main development financial institutions, namely the China Development Bank and the Export and Import Bank of China, provide nearly $500 billion in development financing, finance to foreign governments. So now, as was previously mentioned, the third Belt and Road Forum is going to launch later this month in Beijing. The leaders and the senior officials from approximately 90 nations have expressed their commitment to attend. Of course, the biggest news is that the Vladimir Putin is also going to attend these coming events, and plus the Indonesia President Joko Widodo just inaugurated Southeast Asia's first high-speed railway on October 2nd. So this railway is a flagship project of the high-quality joint construction of the Belt and Road initiatives between China and Indonesia. And the chosen official operation time also bears the significance of paying tribute to the 10th anniversary of the BRI. Let's not forget that Indonesia is one of the two starting points of the BRI, and Xi Jinping first proposed the concept of 21st century maritime Silk Road during his state visit to Indonesia in 2013. So over the past decade, the Belt and Road Initiative has mixed outcomes at best, while it has become a symbol of China's global economic engagement, offering economic gains for both China and participating countries. According to a World Bank study, the BRI could enhance the lives of 100 to 200 million people globally due to the increased trade and investment. Thus, it's not accurate to label the BRI as entirely unsuccessful. It obviously have some success, such as the newly operational high-speed railway in Indonesia, as I just mentioned. However, there have been challenges. Some countries struggle with the debt from the BRI project, such as Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, and environmental concerns and corruptions allegations have arisen. And there's a general perception that the BRI lacks of the transparency compared to the projects backed by the entity like the World Bank. And an analysis from the William and Mary, based on the data set of 13,427 Chinese development initiatives, reveals that 35% of the BRI project have faced issues related to corruption, labor violation, and local environmental risks. And several projects were not well conceived or implemented. In Myanmar, it appears that Chinese planners expected to displace farmers for pipelines constructions, as typically done in China, are leading to massive protests. And in Pakistan, the displaced residents even directly attack the Chinese workers. But in response to these critiques, since 2019, the BRI has been evolving, and changes aim to align it more with China's shifting economic focus, like its commitment to no new coal-fired power plant financing, and efforts are being made to shape the BRI into a greener, digitalized initiatives, such as the Digital Silk Road, which is reflecting China's evolving economic priorities. There also a move towards smaller, more sustainable BRI projects, given the concerns about the high state bank debt in China. There have been significant transformation underway in the BRI, as highlighted by the emergence of the three major initiatives introduced by Xi Jinping in recent years. Those new proposals can be regarded as China's new proposals on global governance, beginning with his 2021 speech at the United Nations, General Assembly, she announced the Global Development Initiatives. This was followed by the declaration of the Global Security Initiatives in his speech at the BRI Forum in 2022, and more recently, in March of this year, during a high-level meeting centered on a dialogue between the CPEC and the global political parties, she unveiled the Global Civilization Initiative. So let's be clear that while these new initiatives are emerging, they won't replace the BRI, but given its inclusion in the CCP constitution. But however, the GDI become more central to the PRC's foreign policy. It might subsuming the BRI. Similarly, the GSI and the GCI are also rising. And so in the leading up to the recent United Nations General Assembly meeting on September 13th, the Beijing proposed a new proposal on the reform and development of global governments. At its core, this statement advocates for a global system that is more inclusive, particularly catering the interests of the global South. So while this call for equity isn't entirely new for Beijing, the new association between their recently introduced initiative like GDI, GSI, and GCI are the core tenet of the United Nations, namely the security, development, and human rights. Is noteworthy. So this connection was particularly evident in the Vice President Han Zheng's recent speech at UN General Assembly 2 weeks ago. It is clear to say that Beijing is actively positioning these three initiatives as complementary to or the supporting mechanism for the United Nations, given the massive diplomatic efforts and the promotions investing in these initiatives, especially during the United Nations General Assembly. It's evident that they will be pivotal to the Chinese foreign policy in the future. So regarding to the impact and implication and the challenges for the BRI for India. So I actually did on this subject, I actually did a comprehensive 354 pages PhD dissertation. So I will highlight some key points from my previous work and add a few more points from the most recent observations. The BRI direct impact to India is partially a hypothetical question, and the benefits and the drawbacks thus are hard to evaluate because India never joins the BRI and even withdrawn from any project that affiliated with it. As we all know that India, abruptly halted the Bangladesh, China, India, and Myanmar economic corridor when it was announced as one of the ambits of the BRI. Although it had been officially signed by the Chinese premier back then, foreign premier Li Keqiang, and his first foreign visit to India since it took office in May 2013. Before examining the implications and the challenges, let us refresh our memories on why India rejected the BRI. Well, because based on the Indians, official response, as well as the media and academic opinions, first and foremost, Indians direct a major concern in the CPEC, an initiative that could legitimize Pakistan's borders over an area that passes through Kashmir in China's eyes, but that ignore the fact that India also claimed the domination over the area. From the Indians' point of view, it is clear that no country can accept the project that ignores its core concerns on sovereignty and territorial integrity. So secondly, India is upset about the perceived unilateral nature of the BRI that lacks consultation with the worlds or the countries that are interested or affected by it. And thirdly, India is suspicious about the BRI because it doesn't accord with international best practice in relations to infrastructure governments and transparency. And finally, India is concerned about BRI's geopolitical and geoeconomic agenda, which will undermine India's interest and influence regionally as well as globally. Well, those obstacles are well demonstrated with interviews for my doctorate dissertation, when the Indian participants were questioned about the barriers preventing India from joining the BRI, the perceived disrespect from China's decision to discard Indian sovereignty by establishing that CPEC is one of the top barriers preventing India from joining the BRI. In fact, this is communicated by nearly 2/3 of the Indian participants in the interview, which align with the discourse of Indians officials and the media. And interestingly, Indians responded overwhelmingly expressed that the BRI was a slap in the face, that China did not answer Indians' concern. It's also two-thirds of the Indian participants expressed the opinion that China ignores India as being a significant factor that prevent India from joining. In addition to the border, in addition to the number above, around 1/3 of the Indian participants regard the border issues between the China and India and the lack of transparency on China's part as being the further encouraging for India to step out of the BRI. And based on the data gathered from the interview, it's evident that India presents considerably geostrategic challenges for India. The BRI presented the considerably geostrategic challenges for India. However, the core of these challenges lie in the unsolved border dispute and the intertwined, ambivalent identity and emotions that exist between these two nations, marked by the feelings of mistrust and perceived betrayal. And those sentiments resonate on both sides and eventually end up in a vicious circle. So despite India ambiguously declined China's invitation to participate in the BRI, it enthusiastically joined the ARB and become the largest beneficiary. Both the BRI and ARB were initiatives by China that aim to offer solutions in overcoming the developmental challenges. India is making full use of the ARB finance for its own developmental projects in compliance with the ARB's requirement and protocols on environmental and social development. But ARB is a multilateral financing institution, unlike the BRI's bilateral nature, and ARB is only contribute a very small amount funding to the BRI projects compared to the Chinese domestic financing institution, as this chart shows. So for addressing the BRI's geopolitical and geoeconomic challenges, Modi's BJP is gradually derailed from India's non-aligned promises. Instead, it chooses to lean to the West, while India has become the critical partner of the Quad and the Indo-Pacific strategy, which expected to become a vital counterweight to China. And in the recent G20 New Delhi summit, as Dr. Bharadwaj just mentioned, India proposed the India, Middle East, Europe economic corridor to boost the trade and communication between Europe and Asia. And this proposed corridor is also seen as an attempt to counter the BRI, even India denies it. But however, the undergoing Hamas, Israel conflict has likely cast a shadow on India's ambition to play a bigger role in the global trade. And the Indian, Middle East, European economic corridor may have fallen flat before it's even born wings. However, one must ponder that the potential for India to reconsider its stance on the BRI, given the current economic challenges China is facing, coupled with the escalating debt concern and all the companies of some of the Western companies are leaving China. So India stands in a favorable position to attract this enterprise. And might there be a strategic merit in leverage funding from China to boost infrastructure and entice business that are looking elsewhere? Well, such a move could be seen as achieving two birds with one stone, but however, it was nothing that the likelihood of this scenario unfolding remains quite slim. So looking to the future, as India echoes the trajectory of China's economic rise, parallels can be drawn with the ambitions of the BRI. Just as the success of the BRI has predominantly benefited the Chinese governments and the CCP, the party, the question arises regarding India's trajectory. As India potentially emerge as a significant player in the global south, will those rewards of its initiatives be recapped largely by the Indian government, or will they be more actively distributed among its citizens? So with the rise of the nationalist and increasing majoritarian or even authoritarian tendencies within India, such concerns become more real. And the underlying question is, as India potentially take a leaf from the BRI's book, will the Indian populace be ready to trade off political freedom for economic gains? The recent detention of the journalist from the news click provides a stark reminder that curtailing the press is often a tactic of authoritarian government. So in the context of regional collaborations, such as the BRI, and the potential for India to undertake similar ventures, these issues demand careful scrutiny and reflection. And the challenges faced by the BRI provide invaluable insights for India's approach to the global governments. Looking ahead, there is a potential for India to collaborate with China through the platform like the GDI, GSI, and especially the GCI. This is particularly relevant considering both nations view themselves as the Asian civilization with rich histories. However, India's relationship with multilateral platform led by China seems to be cooling, notably during the BRICS summit in 2022, India pushed back against China's stance and against the US narratives. Also, India took steps to reposition itself by welcoming new members for the 2023 summit. China's growing influence continued to keep India on its toes. Okay, that will be it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gao. You have finished absolutely in time. And I was just about to say that 2 minutes left.
Thank you.
And thank you for an enlightening discussion. Definitely your research work, extensive research, PhD research has given you more insights into this entire project, which is now really in its mature stages, one would say that. And it is also undergoing transformation. What it was announced and what it is now, the entire issue of debt trap, which it raised. And so the entire financing structures are being changed in the BRI, as I understand now. And it's now more dependent on the public-private partnerships in Africa and other places. As I already mentioned, that the idea of connectivity has caught on in the international circles, and India is definitely developing its own connectivity ideas and basically funding its own ideas also and acting in collaboration with many others. So we'll wait and see how things develop. And now I'll hand over the mic to Manish. And Professor Manish, please let us know your perspectives on this entire issue.
Thank you, Chair. It was a pleasure to see you as chair today, because we're meeting though online after a long time, and we, as you mentioned, we've had enough chais at IDSA, now MP IDSA, right? Thank you, Professor Lakha, as well, and my co-panelist, Waning Gao, for very, very interesting presentation. See, what I'm going to do today is I'll try to, I don't have a slide, so let me make it very clear. And my limitation is that I have focused primarily on English literature and also some of the translations in English from Chinese. So this is one of the limitations of the presentation. Now, there has been a lot of talk about the China's Belt and Road. Very recently, there's been a white paper also, which has been issued by China in this regard. And on the surface of it, what BRI has achieved, as my co-panelist also mentioned, looks certainly impressive, absolutely no doubts about it. From Southeast Asian to Latin American, see, the BRI boasts of roughly 3,000 projects, like the railways, the port highways, the power grids, and it is also set up roughly around, if I'm correct in my figures, 30 overseas economic cooperation zones that support the local industrialization as well. Having said that, the question which I think we should be asking, and I think this is a question which all of us in India are concerned about, whether BRI has been a geostrategic project or a geoeconomic project. My key findings are like this, that there are strategic drivers behind China's Belt and Road initiative, but it's also motivated by countries pressing domestic and economic challenges. And also there are combination of strategic and economic drivers. It's not always, though it's not always easy to reconcile. In some cases, you will see that China's strategic objectives make it difficult to sell economic aspects of the initiative to China's neighbors. And thirdly, the Chinese government is keen to use this initiative to achieve, though important, economic policy objectives, but there are some Chinese financiers and policymakers. They are cautious about funding what they say a very risky Belt and Road projects outside China, fearing of poor returns on their investments. So what I'll try to do today is I'll try to divide my this lecture into three sections. Broadly, I'll cover India's neighborhood, Pakistan, Nepal particularly, and subsequently later I'll try to discuss about the approaches, the Indian approach and the Chinese approach to BRI. Now, as we know, as I said, the whole debate about BRI, whether it's a geostrategic or economic, geoeconomic initiative, I think partly it goes back to the 18-party Congress in 2013, where there were heated debates about the Chinese policymakers and the scholars about the strategic direction in which countries' foreign policies should go, rather, especially in the neighborhood. And if I recall, in October 2013, Beijing convened a very important conference on what it was called the peripheral diplomacy. It was reportedly the first major foreign policy meeting since 2006 and the first ever meeting on policy towards the neighboring countries since the founding of the People's Republic of China. It was attended by all of the most important players in the Chinese foreign policy making process, including the entire standing committee of the Politburo. So at this peripheral diplomacy work conference, it was stated that China's neighbors had extremely significant strategic value. And it was also added that China wanted to improve relations between China and its neighbors, strengthening of economic ties, deepening of the security cooperation. So for China, basically, it's clear that there was considerable economic resource as a key tool in its efforts to maintain regional stability and also to assert China's leadership in the country's neighborhood. Now, this new, more activist foreign policy has reinforced the impression that BRI is primarily driven by broad geostrategic objectives. And certainly some elements of BRI are consistent with such characterizations. First, if I have to mention the China-Pakistan economic corridor, is one of the prime examples. And it's widely regarded as one of the flagship projects of BRI, and is, though very, very enthusiastically supported both by Beijing and Islamabad. The second, I think the most important, is the commercial port, the Gwadar port, which is also a deep port, deep enough to accommodate submarines and aircraft carriers. Indeed, the military logic behind the development of the port is becoming increasingly prominent as the PLAN embarks on the far-flung activities from anti-piracy missions in the Arabian Sea to the evacuation of Chinese workers in Libya. So I think this is getting very, very clear. Coming on the geoeconomic aspects, the problem with the narrow geostrategic interpretations of BRI is not that they are wrong, but that they are incomplete, right? And this is what we find in most of the debates. Many analysts, you will see, tend to overstate the geostrategic dimension of the project, while underappreciating the economic agenda of BRI. So there is an economic agenda, I don't deny it completely, but there is a geostrategic agenda, and this is what I suggest this. The two goals are not, in fact, rather contradictory, please understand, the geostrategic and the geoeconomic goal. China is using BRI to assert its regional leadership through a vast program of what you can say economic integration. And it aims to create a sort of a regional production chain within which China would be a center of advanced manufacturing and innovation, and also the standard settler. But this is also true that BRI will help China to meet some of the most pressing economic challenges which China is facing at this point. And of these challenges, three in particular are very, very important. First is the encouraging regional development in China to what you can say the better integration. The second is upgrading the Chinese industry. And also, thirdly, addressing the problem of excess capacity. So I think these are some of the very, very important things which we also need to keep this in mind. Now, at the BRI conference, also, many of the members of the Politburo Standing Committee who were overseeing this initiative urged that some of the signature projects to be implemented quickly, showing a sort of a tangible benefits and early successes, right? And one of, but I'm sure the initiatives face multiple formidable challenges too. One of the significant lack of political trust between China and the number of important BRI countries. That's number one, which I see as a major challenge. The second problem is that nearly 2/3 of the BRI countries have sovereign credit rating below investable grade, right? I mean, one example is Pakistan. Pakistan is also unstable, which possesses significant risks to Chinese companies as well as the personals who are working. And the third problem, which I see, is a caution on the part of over-leveraged and risk-averse Chinese finances. Right, so having said that, let's come to the neighborhood part, wherein I think, which is also one of major India's concern, the CPEC. To better understand the situation, we can examine at least two of China's close allies, Nepal and Pakistan, both of which have significant ties with China. As we all know, Pakistan had joined BRI in 2013. And even before that, before Pakistan joining the BRI, there were discussions between both Islamabad and Beijing about establishing a sort of an economic corridor. At 2013, they announced the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC, right? And wherein the main aim was to link Pakistan's Gwadar port in the southwest with Kashgar in China's Xinjiang province. CPEC, by the way, was considered to be one of the prominent projects of the BRI. And this project was intended to transform the Pakistan's economy. It was launched at a very, very critical time when Pakistan faced challenges like internal security crisis, increased terror attacks, the economic issues, so on and so forth. But as we evaluate CPEC, since 2018, we see that progress on CPEC has been slowed down due to these very, very important reasons. Firstly, the Chinese investors in Pakistan became targets of militant attacks, which prompted the Chinese leaders to call for a better security measures for their citizens in Pakistan. And as we all know currently, Islamabad is also facing the worst economic crisis since its inception. There has been reports published in May 23, which revealed that approximately 50% of Islamabad's foreign loans come from China, which is affecting essential services such as education, fuel, electricity, and tax revenues. They are all impacted. So, and there are also plans in May, the extension of BRI was to extend it into Afghanistan. And this also has raised suspicions about China's intent in tapping Afghanistan's abundant resources, and particularly the rare earth, which has been more talked about. China has agreed to extend $62 billion of CPEC to Kabul after the Taliban's agreement to join. The second country which I thought I'll bring is Nepal, which is also a signatory to BRI in 2017. And currently China is its largest creditor. Initially, Kathmandu had agreed to 35 projects under BRI, but by 2019, they requested a reduction to only 9 projects. And Nepal has made it clear that they preferred grant or soft loans instead of high interest loans or short-term repayment timelines. And due to financial difficulties, which we all know faced by Colombo, officials in Nepal now are very, very cautious about the Chinese financing. Despite reaching agreements on various projects, no project under the BRI has been implemented in Nepal since 2017. I can give you some examples. The 150-kilometer railway line, which was connecting in southern Tibet, was agreed upon in 2018. And in 2022, China pledged roughly $118 million grant for the Trans-Himalayan multidimensional connectivity economic corridor. And this was also very hailed as a way to transform Nepal from a landlocked to a land-linked country. However, these two projects have not yet been realized. So having said that, and since the chair brought in the issue of connectivity, and since BRI is a connectivity project. What are the key differences between India and China when it comes to connectivity initiatives? And as I said, the connectivity initiative that China and other Asian countries are pursuing across Asia and the Indian Ocean region, building new infrastructure, institutions, and interlinkages are arguably redrawing the continent's map. That's not just economic implications, but certainly it has geopolitical ones. And India has been relatively silent on perhaps the most talked about the BRI. We haven't spoken much on BRI, except that there are reservations on the CPEC part. But I think what has been India's approach, and I think 2 or 3 very important speeches which were made by the External Affairs Minister at one point, the Foreign Secretary at Raisina dialogue actually set the tone and tenor of India's policy when it comes to connectivity. I think the C word, without once naming China, in one of the dialogues, the Indian official laid down Delhi's perception that countries' connectivity initiatives and contrasted with the Chinese and Indian approaches to connectivity and the region would be like this. The importance of Asian connectivity and importance and challenges, I think in one of the speeches, I don't remember, but it was, I think, Ms. Sushma Swaraj when she was the foreign minister. And I quote, we bring to bear a cooperative rather than a unilateral approach, and believe that creating an environment of trust and confidence is a prerequisite for a more interconnected world. I think this is what sets the tone and tenor of how India envisages the connectivity projects. Indian Foreign Secretary also in one of the meetings pointed out, and again I quote, because a national initiative is devised with national interest, and an international and a regional initiative has other interests which have to be reconciled into that. So where we stand is that if this is something on which they want a larger buy-in, then they need to have a larger discussions, and those haven't happened. I think these are 2 very important speeches which actually gives some indication as to how India would be possibly approaching the issue of connectivity. And I think as it's time, 10 years of BRI, I think both India and China will have to rethink as to how they would approach if both countries need to have a broader cooperation on many of these connectivity projects. I will stop here. I'll be very happy to take questions. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor Manish, for a wonderful presentation, and where you brought out the fact that the differences between India's and Chinese approach to connectivity primarily, that ours is more based on cooperation and Chinese is little more unilateral approach that they've adopted because of more funding, because of the excessive surplus that was available with China. And you also mentioned that there is a sort of kind of, one needs to see the entire BRI in terms of it's both economic and strategic goals of BRI seems to merge, basically. That's what you have suggested. And we can't look at it in isolation and consider it to be a purely geo-economic initiative which was launched by China. Now, we've seen that China is actually testing America's international economic clout, whether it is in terms of the reserve currency or in terms of other areas. So basically, China is developing a sort of a via media to connect through BRI to connect the global south through more money that it is about to lend. China has actually lent about 1 trillion to the developing countries ever since the BRI was launched, even before that, and mostly to build the infrastructure under the BRI. As many of these countries have slipped into financial crisis where China has invested, China's financial institutions have stepped in also with bailout packages that have totaled about about 240 billion between 2000 and the end of 2021. This is according to a very recent study in the West. Now, this total amount actually is more than 20% of the total IMF lending over the past decade. So that is the extent to which China has been lending, and China has been, moving into countries of the global south with a lot of money and a lot of infrastructure and the ability to implement those infrastructure projects. Now, there are concerns about the Chinese money, and these concerns are being increasingly raised by various countries. As Professor Manish has told us, whether it is in Pakistan or even in Nepal, a lot of issues are coming up. The whole financing structure, initially, to begin with, China threw a lot of money, without thinking much, and it led to debt traps. And now, of course, as I mentioned earlier, now the entire financial structures are undergoing some kind of an evolution and a change. So now with this, I would say let's have more questions now, and you can type in your questions, or as Akshat, they can type in their questions, or some people can even ask directly.
Certainly, sir.
Those who have access can ask the questions directly, and otherwise you can type in. And Akshat, I'm sure you are going to read out the questions.
Yes, sir. So we have a raised hand from Dr. Hemant Atlakha.
Okay.
Oops.
Okay. You want me to begin my questions now? Okay. Well, let me first congratulate and thank you both, Waning Gao and Manish, for presenting a very comprehensive view with profound insight on BRI, and also Atul for his initial thought. If I may be permitted to ask three quick questions. I have one question each for Waning Gao and Manish. And I have one common question which can be addressed by any of the three panelists. Well, my question for Ms. Gao is that as BRI completes 10 years and China is gearing up for a grand celebration on October 17th, 18th at the BRI Third Forum, do you think GDI, GSI, and GCI is Global Development Initiative, Global Security Initiative, and Global Civilization Initiative? They were launched to support and play a supplementary role to strengthen the BRI, especially in the Global South countries on the one hand, and on the other hand, to implement with renewed vigor the Chinese strategic objective of transforming global order aimed at challenging and to replace the US hegemony. This is my question to Ms. Gao. And my question to Manish is, with sluggish Chinese economy showing no signs of recovery, the pace and size of BRI, as we now know, and notwithstanding the claims in yesterday's white paper on BRI, you also mentioned the white paper, the claim that the BRI now has projects or links with 152 countries, 37 international organizations, etc. Do you think that the sluggish economy with no sign of slow recovery will increasingly come under pressure to reduce or streamline its scope? And if what is being claimed, if it is true, that is the US plus Indian initiative launched at the recent G20, referring to the IMEC. Do you think IMEC would eclipse the growing influence and popularity of BRI, especially in the global south? And what are its benefits or implications for India? And my common question is, an important yet understudied aspect of China's fast expanding BRI is to squeeze out foreign competitors from the markets or the countries where the BRI is present, especially in Africa and Latin America. And the BRI's ultimate objective, on the one hand, is to enable China to emerge as an alternative to the US global hegemony. While on the other hand, and that is also the short-term objective of the BRI, to help Chinese corporations to reverse the trend of their diminishing profits. This is my common question. Thank you.
Thank you, Hemant. Dr. Gao, would you like to go first?
Yeah, sure. I will go first. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Hemant, for your questions. So you asked my predictions about this coming third forum about these three Chinese new proposals, whether it's going to be brought up in these events. That's a good question, but I do think that the definitely this forum is definitely about the BRI, is about the networking, the celebrate the achievements, to seeking more opportunities, because the shift is, as both me and Professor Manish just before mentioned, the BRI project is gradually shift from the big to the small and beautiful project. So China definitely gonna seeking more opportunities to engage with different kind of company, different kind of countries to establish more opportunities. But I also think Xi Jinping probably gonna brought those three proposals a little bit up, but not necessarily promoting that in a massive way, but maybe just for a broad introduction, or let other participant countries to understand what are those things. I'm not sure whether India going to send any representatives. I assume maybe not, as the first and second time they never send any. So that's how I address your questions briefly. But I'm trying to draw everybody's attention, between the BRI and the global development initiative, because it sounds like kind of similar, whether maybe the BRI gonna fall under the global development initiatives in future, but there definitely have some differences in their objectives and in their operationalization. So the BRI the background from the BRI emerging after the global finance crisis, an aim to strengthen China's linkage with the global south beyond trade, especially the global modernity boom waned, and the GDI was introduced during the COVID-19 pandemic, which at the time when the BRI objects were affected and the infrastructure investment was slowing. And the BRI launch, coincident with the US, pivot to Asia strategy, and the GDI came, between the US and China, competition, and in response to the rival development initiatives. And the GDI's introduction aligned with the China's 14th 5-year plan and emphasize sustainable, growth and innovative infrastructure projects. And the domestic context is very different, and now China is raising debt level from the 2.1% of GDP in 2013 to 8.6% in 2020, which is hindered its ability to finance large-scale infrastructure projects that characterized by the BRI. And the BRI initiative proposed made in, as I mentioned, Kazakhstan and Indonesia, while GDI was launched at the United Nations General Assembly, indicated a push towards a multilateralism. And the different, policy bodies govern the two initiatives, the National Development and Reform Commissions for the BRI and the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for the GDI. And the GDI, appears more focused on the, as I mentioned, the multilateralism and have a broader engagement with currently speaking, with the civil society. And the finance, the BRI have a diverse financial sources, including the policy bank and the commercial entities. The GDI mainly draws from the Global Development and South-South Cooperation Fund. So it's going to be addressed concerns like corruptions and the transparencies in Chinese aid. And that's the those of the differences which I have in mind that I think I need to address to your questions about this, these three new proposals and the relationship between that and the BRI. Thank you.
Manish, you can go ahead with your answers. Please unmute yourself, Manish.
Yeah, thank you, sir. In fact, on the connectivity issue, connectivity is one of the very, very important, concerns, whether be it for China, whether be it for India, because of the world is so complex, intertwined. So I think both countries are trying to look for connectivity. And I think the recent initiative, the Arab-Mediterranean corridor, which was announced, I think this possibly could emerge as a sort of a multimodal commercial corridor that could radically, reconfigure the trade patterns between the Indian Ocean region, on the one hand, the Middle East and Europe. Now, there are certain assumptions before it gets translated into reality. What's the assumption? The assumption is the normalization of relations between UAE and Israel. I think that was one very important aspects. And it is this which is going to give rise to a creation of a UAE to Israel railway network via Saudi Arabia and Jordan, with Israel's Haifa port as its Mediterranean terminal. There have been studies which have been done. I remember one of these studies having gone through, which was published by Institute for South Asian Studies, Singapore, 2 years back. But in the current scenario, what possibly would be the future of this corridor is something which I think needs to be tested. But this was actually the initial plan, because once this multimodal connectivity comes through, right, from Mumbai, if I have to say, from Mumbai, Indian goods shipped via this route could arrive to European mainland in as little as 10 days, which is roughly 40% lesser than, rather faster than via the Suez Canal maritime route. So I think this possibly could have been the calculations. And I think, as mentioned by the previous speaker also, I think connectivity is going to be one of the very important issues. Giving the location, the geographies of both these countries, I think I think both countries would be looking for alternate connectivity routes. So this is basically my take on this. Thank you. Hopefully I have been able to answer. But there are some very interesting studies which have been done on these subjects.
Thank you so much, Manish. And, one tends to agree because the G7 has also pledged about 600 billion to be spent by 2027, primarily on global infrastructure, and which is to count primarily the BRI.
Yes.
You actually see.
Yes.
And so, Akshat, do we have some other questions, please?
Yes, sir. We have a question from Ambassador Kishan Rana. He is an emeritus fellow at the ICS. His question is for Professor Manish. He asks, what exactly is geostrategic? For example, is a railway link to Europe or cables providing massive data transfer between China and Europe geostrategic? And is that a bad thing? The CPEC is in effect a disaster. There is not much traffic, road or via shipping through Gwadar, and Pakistan is left with a debt it cannot repay. It seems to be a huge failure. Should we not reassess the BRI?
No, I think, it's a question which we all know. It's redefining what geostrategy is all about. And as scholars of international relations know, it's primarily a geographic direction of a state's foreign policy. This is what I mean, right? When I use this term, and to be more precise, geostrategy describes where a state concentrates its efforts. I'm talking about the foreign policy efforts, and by also projecting its military power, right? So this is what. So Gwadar Port, if I talk of Gwadar Port, right, and the Chinese presence on Gwadar Port, it's not purely economic. I gave you the examples that the port can be used for multiple purposes, various purposes, right from piracy, patrolling to a lot of other aspects. And I think India as a country would never like to see any bigger power closer to what it perceives to be its zone of influence. So I think it's very, very clear in my wisdom, and I think this is what I mean when I use the term geostrategy.
Perfect. Some more questions?
Yes, sir. We have a question from Professor Patricia Oproy. She is also an emeritus fellow at the ICS. Her professor is for Dr. Gao. She says, India's participation in the BRI was initially through the BCIM project. BCIM was conceived much before the BRI as a sub-regional project primarily. When Dr. Gao conducted her survey of Indian opinion, did she conduct any interviews with opinion makers in India's Northeast region?
Yeah, well, thank you for the question. But for the first one, I don't really understand the question. This seems to me is like a make an argument rather than a question. So what exactly the question about the BCIM for?
Basically, would you like to come in? Professor Patricia, would you like to come in?
Okay, perhaps, okay, let's just refresh our memory again to think about the origins of the BCRM. It was, of course, it's conceived as a sub-regional cooperation primarily aimed at fostering the socio-economic development in the region that encompasses Bangladesh and China, particularly the Yunnan province, and India, especially the northeastern states and Myanmar. Well, the idea of this cooperation began as the Kunming initiative during the multi-country academic conference in 1999. Of course, it's way back than the BRI. It was envisioned as a platform for the academic and later enterprise exchange. So China later, incorporate the BCIM into the broader framework of its ambitious the BRI project, which aims to connect Asia India, which connect, the Southeast and South Asia, and through this network of roads or railways and ports. And but doing so, China sought to give the BCRM economic corridor a more substantial push by aligning it with Beijing's broader connectivity vision. So Indian has been on board on the BCM at the very beginning, but then later, because India reject the BRI, so India has been very cautious about the BRI, and primarily due to we already mentioned many times the sovereignty concerns. So and also the CPEC. So
Dr. Gao, if I may interject, the question which I understand it now is basically she's asked you that since you've studied this subject of BCIM and Professor Patricia was involved in the entire project study from its very inception. And so she's asked basically a question: have you actually, during your research, did you interact with any of the decision makers, especially in India's northeast regions, and have you taken their opinion on what exactly they mean by whether they would like BCIM to be reinitiated, or whether what is their opinion on the whole issue? During your study, did you gather?
Oh, yes, I did. Actually, I interviewed some policymakers, which they actually feel very sad about dropping these initiatives. So I think that's primarily answer the professor's question, and it's a very unfortunate thing happened because of the BRI, because of the label of the BRI, so the whole BCRM get dropped.
Okay, thank you. Next question.
So
Manish,
we have a question.
You want to intervene on this particular any issue? Manish? No. Okay. We'll move in the next question.
Yes, we have a question from Mr. Rappai. He says that, in my view, the GDI, GSI, and GCI is a much larger project than the BRI. China is trying to put forth its future global governance model beyond the current UN-based system. If you would like to contribute a little to this.
Yes. Well, I think I partially agree with this argument, but I think China is trying to push it for the future global governance model. I'm not saying beyond, maybe perhaps like a support mechanism or a guide for the current UN-based system, which try to counter the West so-called the rule-based global order. So that's China's big ambition, and it's going to be larger. It's going to be much larger than the BRI, but larger. Well, we have to define what does larger mean, right? So that's, and also is just like even the BRI is already been 10 years, but still sometimes we are very uncertain about what the BRI is. It has money, but sometimes we don't even know where this money goes and how it spends, because it's not as much as transparent. But for these three projects, three initiatives is much more like a buzzword now, but we are still waiting maybe for a long time for its unfolding. Thanks.
Next question.
So we have a question from Mr. Ravi Bhutalingam. His question is for Dr. Gao. He asks, in what precise ways will the GDI avoid the financial pitfalls of the BRI and yet meet infrastructure needs of countries?
Okay, thank you, Ravi, for these great questions, and nice to see you again. I think China is learning because those BRI, some of the projects is a total failure. And also China have to learn to spend money smartly and, to achieve what's their goals. And it's definitely have the different kind of evaluation mechanism. But, because as I just mentioned, these things is just unfolding, and there's a last research is done, and there's no so-called flagship initiatives or projects is labeled as this GDI. So I'm waiting and see how this gonna work. So I hope this address your questions.
I as chair would like to use my privilege, of course, to ask question to both of them. And one issue is that 10 years back when BRI started, China's economy was in a much better shape. The world was not as polarized as it is today. The China-American rivalry was not as pronounced as it is today. And in view of this, do you think, and there are a lot of other initiatives, whether it is G7 or there are other countries combined, new groupings are emerging, which are, redefining connectivity. And connectivity now, what is no longer exclusively, the domain which China can claim to represent. So in this perspective, is the Chinese BRI going to face more and more challenges in the coming days? We've seen this, if at all, there are still a lot of question marks, as Manish himself, if the India-Middle East Economic Corridor was to, become operational in next decade or more, maybe another 15 years, would that basically, challenge the entire concept of Eurasia, which the Chinese have been, developing through the BRI? Because that would definitely bypass Central Asia, and there will be a new connectivity from India right up to Europe. And so that would Central Asia, Russia, so all will get eliminated if this corridor was to come up. And there are a lot of other challenges which are being. So in this perspective, is BRI now facing more trouble, and is China really worried?
Can I go first?
Yeah, please.
I think I would agree with you if you I would agree with you, because I think the domestic financing situation getting worse and worse, and China's economy is declining, so simply they cannot afford those. But also at the same time, those large-scale project is become smaller and beautiful, if we hope so. So but so at the same time, China going to be very cautiously or very carefully choose the project to support or to invest. At the same time, all the China's neighborhood and the big bridge or railway go through the Eurasia. It's a very unpredictable geopolitical, geoeconomic situations in there. Look what happened in Ukraine. Look what happened in Hamas, as in Gaza and in Israel now. So when those unpredictable conflict happen, that's gonna definitely hinder no matter China's initiative or India's proposed initiative, for sure. And to what extent, how it's gonna affect that's gonna depends on how big the conflict is and how to resolve them. But what I think is that the offering more initiative is better than no initiatives to offer, right? If you can help those neighborhood countries to build a road and maintaining a good infrastructure, and think you can afford it. And in terms of Chinese officials' words, build a common destiny for shared future for the mankind, that would be great. But whether this can be achieved or not, it's very nowadays, because of the global background, is kind of not very encouraging. Thank you.
Manish, what is your views on the future of BRI?
I mean, as I mentioned, there are challenges to BRI, and the Chinese also are aware of these challenges. Many of the new initiatives which my co-panelist mentioned is precisely because the Chinese are actually wanting to deepen their engagement in global governance issues. I think BRI was rather a smaller project in that sense. But most of the new initiatives which China is pushing for is precisely because China is deepening its engagement in global governance. And possibly because there is a thinking and a reflection that it's a rising power, and also it gives some sort of international status. And obviously there has been a long-standing aspiration also in China to contribute towards what you can say the making and shaping of the international order. So I think this is my understanding, that I think Chinese are aware, though they are aware of the challenges, it may not come very clearly, but possibly they may come up with some new initiatives which would subsume some of the previous initiatives. As we see, when it comes to global governance also, China's approach has shifted beyond what you can say the traditional defensive stance. It has been into now more active engagement. And this new alignment of the Chinese foreign policy indeed suggests a growing confidence on the part of CCP leadership. This is what my understanding is all about this.
Thank you so much. Any other questions which are floating around, Akshat?
So there are no more questions in the chat box.
So that's very good. So we are just about to finish. No, we have had a good set of questions, and we've had an enlightening discussion throughout. And connectivity remains an important issue in global geopolitics today, and it will continue to shape global politics in the future, in the coming decades, as we all know, whether it is BRI or other initiatives. Connectivity remains at the core of international politics of 21st century. It has a lot to do with environment, the ocean-going vessels, which are more environmentally more damaging at the moment. Similarly, the economy demands the new economy, the gig economy. The economy is based on online, internet, supply lines, demands faster travel of goods. So that is going to demand more connectivity, more routes, new trade routes. The emerging markets, the emerging powers in the global politics demand more routes, or demand a greater say in the service industry that controls the international trade. Currently, the international trade which flows on the oceans is controlled by the West, and which has been there for the last more than 3 or 4 centuries. The West has controlled international trade, and the global South has not really had much say in determination of freight rates or the insurance rates of how the goods would flow. New connectivity routes and alternative routes is definitely going to add to global South's position in terms of determining how the supply chains operate, and they will have a greater say in the global economy. So with that perspective, I think there is a lot of scope for cooperation, both among China, India, and rest of the world, in terms of developing in new routes, in terms of also developing, say, land, in terms of reducing the imbalances between the coastal and the landlocked states. If you now see Kazakhstan emerging as one of the hubs of new routes. That was a landlocked country. Those landlocked countries have not had much international trade for a long, long time. the exposure to the international markets or easy exposure to the international markets. So that all these factors combined are demand that new connectivity develops, but that connectivity has to develop under a cooperative umbrella. And any unilateral imposition of connectivity is definitely going to be challenged. And as the world is becoming more polarized, if China tries to impose, it will be challenged by the rest of the world. And if it is developed in a cooperative framework, I'm sure multilateralism is likely to grow. Thank you. We've had a wonderful discussion. And thank you, Manish. Thank you, Dr. Gao. And I'm sure we're going to see much more work happening on these particular issues in the coming years in the universities and elsewhere. ICS, of course, has been promoting this idea of BRI, not promoting exactly, but has been working on this idea of BRI and trying to understand its various aspects. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
So with your permission, shall we conclude the session?
Please.
Right. Thank you, sir. With this, we shall wrap up today's session. We thank Dr. Gao and Professor Manish for gracing the session with their time. We also thank Dr. Bhardwaj for chairing the session. The video of today's discussion shall be available on the ICS's YouTube channel. The ICS conducts seminars every Wednesday, and I would like to invite you to join our next seminar on Japan's new national security strategy, reactions from domestic constituencies. Further information regarding the topic can be found on the ICS website. You may also subscribe to our newsletter for regular updates. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you.